Correct. So, warmly welcome to this afternoon session. So we are in the second day, and there is a lot of discussions going on, but we should start and utilize the time. So welcome to this session, which is the Building Industrial Partnership for the Future. 2022 RDA had a new framework, the value of RDA to the industry. So what could RDA contribute with to the industry? And the aim for today is to share and discuss possibilities and also potential impacts within this framework. And of course, to understand common challenges across the disciplines. Sorry. It's my teacher thing that I'm normally walking in front somewhere. And we are very happy to have four, I have to count, I was not counting Monica because she's the organizer, but 5 distinguished representatives from different companies, global companies that have a lot of data that is used for development in different ways and are big producers and consumers of data, and a lot of collaborations with also the public sector in different ways. So we will utilize the time, start off with the 5 presentations, get the view from these different companies, and then we will open up the floor for discussions. So I would like to welcome Henrik Redin, who is, I need to check your new title because it's very long, Director External Research and Exploration Coordination at Volvo Cars. Please. Henrik and me have been working at the university together, so that's
yeah,
why.
we have a history. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. As Max said, I'm working with external collaborations, essentially dealing with IP questions also in contracts, and of course data becomes one of the priorities there. So I need to manage data in various ways. I guess this is an international crowd. I usually start with the question, who drives a Volvo? Because Swedes drives Volvos, right? We know that. We love the company. But there's one thing that we take very seriously. Nobody should have to die in Volvo. That's our promise to our customers. We're extending that at the moment to go beyond the car as well. So we want our cars not to be a threat to anybody that moves in the city or in the countryside. So that's very, very important for us. And that's kind of the backbone where we come from whenever we do research collaborations, whenever we do anything, whenever we sell a car. So it's a very complex world. We're possibly the most complex product that's being sold on this planet, in a way. The number of source codes, the number of rows in the source code exceeds a fighter jet, which is pretty amazing. Exceeds an aircraft. So we're very complex, and we have complexity built in because of a number of reasons. Our product is in motion. So it has the function in Oslo, in Reykjavik, and in Beijing. That gives pressure on how we actually communicate and send data and how we harmonize this. We integrate people in our product. People want to use communication. They want to access data. They want to see films. They want to hear the radio, etc., etc. Of course, we talk about autonomous drive. And that means that we need to communicate with other cars in order to support each other. But we also need to communicate with other things like infrastructure. So we interface the world in numerous ways. We also have a history that brings data with us. so the production of a car, and how to actually make sure that this data is intact when we have over-the-air downloads of new source code, for instance. And how do we manage this? It's a pipeline to the rest of the world because we also give away data. We want our cars to be a possibility and something that can be valuable for society. And of course, there's a backend solution, a cloud solution to manage all this. So, accessibility at all stages, safety and security at all stages, comfort and trust at all stages. Those are values for us that we need to manage in this complex product. So we need data for the safety of the people, but in the vehicle, but also around the vehicle. Also, simplicity and user-friendliness is important. So this is also why we need to access data, manage data, and create data. And of course, we're a company. We're obliged by law to create a profit. Sometimes people believe that companies are evil because they need to create a profit, but it's actually an obligation by law. So what do we require from data? It has to be trustworthy. We have to be able to trace the ownership. It should be fair because we believe in being a sustainability and ethical company. And it has to have good quality. It should be secure when it comes to the content. It should be secure when it comes to the delivery of the data. Our car can't, in a crash situation, wait for data to be delivered. We rely on it instantly. And it should be accessible. Sitting in Sweden, we're pretty proud and we have a very good infrastructure when it comes to, for instance, 4G, 5G. But that's not the case all over Europe. And the rest of the world, of course, is also different here. So that gives some challenges. It should also be useful with respect to, for instance, the development pipeline. We have to be able to trust the data that is delivered, that we will have it at the same quality or possibly better quality in 2 years' time. The access to data can't be cut if we rely on it. So we talk about cyber safety, cyber trust, and cyber sustainability in that aspect. That gives us a very good equation if we can make sure that we can rely on those three things. We also have some R&D fundamentals that we believe in. We believe in science-based policy. My wife's a politician in the city, and we debate whether or not we can have science-based policy in the politician's world. Of course, politicians sometimes need to make decisions. They can't wait for science. But they have to be flexible, and when science, so to say, catches up or changes, they need to take that into account. We believe in this as a company as well. Sometimes we make the wrong choices, but we need to be in touch with science as a base and a foundation for actually correcting those and making that in a better direction. And of course, when it comes to academia, industry, and the citizens or the public organizations, because it's really the citizen base we talk about, there are different things that needs to be taken into account when it comes to data and when it comes to R&D. And we do think that it is essential for us as a company, for me as a citizen, and a participant in this world to actually have big wins for everybody. Because we think about the transition into the future. Yes, thank you, Max. And we actually need to make this a good world and a sustainable world to live in. I will make some pretty much quick things here then. What do we need from society when it comes to this? Well, we need data savvy engineers because data becomes so much more important. We need better educated people at the companies. We need resilient infrastructure and legal systems. The legal system is very important here, I think. How do we actually make sure and ascertain that we create the right laws? And we need data literacy. But I talked about balance. Open science. I have a background as an elementary particle physicist. It's blue sky research. It's so far away from any application you wouldn't even imagine it. It's like 400, 500 years to application. That's where I come from. So I do know blue sky research. But I would stress that I also know the industry. And open does not mean free to use with no strings attached. We have to recognize that. Could be strings attached to companies, but it can also be strings attached to the public. I do prefer a discussion not only about human rights, but human obligations. And this is the balance that we have to take into account. It's responsible use. We also need to stress that open does not have to be free of charge for all purposes and all the time. Sometimes free is good, sometimes it's not. Data ownership needs to be established and formalized. If you don't know where the data comes from, if you don't know its quality, and if you don't know who owns it, how can you actually use it? If I take my car keys and throw them to you in the audience and say, here's my car, you can have it, then you probably want to know that I own the car and can give it away. Why don't we do that with data? Can we actually use something and be comfortable about it without establishing ownership in order to be able to give it away sometimes? And then, of course, data valuation. That's extremely tricky. What's the value of data? And that's contextual. So that's an open challenge for all of us, I think. I think that was my last slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Henrik. And my guess is that you don't own your car, so probably. Now I run into a bit of problem here because either the two of you have exactly the same title or I have copied incorrectly, and I guess I copied incorrectly. But Richard Pitts, please, you're at the Oracle Research, and I do think you have the title Director of External Research Exploration.
No, I don't have the title.
No, I made it wrong.
So let me do my title for you.
So I was correct for Henrik then.
That's a good start. Yes. So I have the title of Senior Research Advocate for Oracle for Research. So let me introduce a bit about what I am and where we come from. So first of all, I've been here all week and absolutely delighted in joining the conference and listening to the presentations. It's been phenomenal, and Hillary's celebration of the 10 years was brilliant. So thank you for that. So my background, let me just start with that. I am originally a biologist by training, and my first project was on polymorphic genes in a little English spider. You can't get more fundamental than that sort of thing. I moved to fixing bugs in the Oracle database and did that for 15 years. And then, and that's the side of Oracle which you would call the open side, the side where the development goes on and the work. And then I joined the dark side, which is the sales, and finally have ended up in the best job in the world, which is working back with scientists and researchers in Europe. And I'll explain a bit about that in a second. But finally, I just wanted to say, I'm dreadfully impressed with this whole science park that we have here. And in my hotel room, I was delighted to see that they recognize that I am originally a scientist by serving in my mini bar. Nothing scares me. I'm a scientist beer, which has to be the best beer in the world for us here. I would like just quickly to introduce the strategist in our team that brought me to be here with you today. And I would really love for Marcy to be with us today. She lives in San Francisco. Our team operates in 6 time zones. It's a bit tricky sometimes. And for environmental reasons and for budgetary reasons, I got the gig, which is brilliant. So I'm very pleased to be here. But Marcy is overseeing it, and we are working together with the RDA on our work with you. Oracle for Research is engaging with academic, commercial, and governments to do good research. We're here to promote good research, and I'm here really to help get some things started with you in RDA in the next few days. Our products are working with the Oracle Cloud and making best use of those capabilities and introducing the scientific world to what Oracle Cloud can do for you. We have programs and partnerships. The partnership with RDA is a very good example. We have programs which I'll explain in a minute, but we're about community. So one of the greatest things I was delighted to kick off in the UK last year was actually to be the key sponsor for Research Software Engineering Conference. And there are some people that were at that conference here today, and I'm delighted that I've had a chance to meet with them. And I see our connections with RDA as being just the next level of where we're going in our open journey. But open for me probably started with the database, and like all good database engineers, the only thing that you regard as open is the third normal form relational database design of the database that's needed. Oracle has been for a long time a great promoter of developer tools and making those open and free for people to use and then to build onto the tool sets. But of course, that isn't really where we should be with these things. I don't know whether you appreciate, but Oracle's strategy has always been open to communicating and working with people. And my working with researchers here is a natural extension of that. But every product within the Oracle database, for example, will have connections to the right standards boards and committees. And going forward, I see us using the outputs from the RDA informing some of the research products and tools that we produce. I think one of the biggest changes for me was reading Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric Raymond, as to really opening up the idea that you don't just have to be commercial. It's a fine, fine book and really explains another way of looking at commercial. But I also would say, and I'm sure everyone else on the panel would agree with me, there's no such thing ultimately as a free lunch. Everyone needs to survive somehow. But we also need common language. And I was talking to Marcy about this, and I think there are lots of languages that you could say are common, but one of the most interesting ones, and made me laugh when I found this, was this idea of sign language. And we need standards and means of communicating data between different groups and languages, and looking to make things work in an open and performant way. So Oracle for Research, our aim is research first, partnering wherever we can, and we're engineering products to work with you to make it easy to use, and above all, getting the best results possible for your work. There are lots of things to think about, and there are sort of 4 calls to action that I would say. And the first one, which is most important and why I'm really here today, is your input into our working group with the RDA is most important. And looking at how we can facilitate open data publication, it always horrifies me, and at the risk of upsetting a few people, the price that researchers have to pay to get things published in an open way is quite horrendous sometimes. So we would love you to join us and participate in this new collaboration. So that's a call to action 1. We can, oh yes, that's a bit too fast. Let's go back. Cloud is a perfect platform for working with lots of people in lots of places. Oracle Cloud, AWS Cloud, it's a great place for collaboration. We have a really open attitude to this. You can see there's so many logos up there. I'll let you work them out when you look at the slides later. But the fundamentals of that will provide you with a platform for doing anything. The biggest delight I got last year was running Fortran on the Oracle Cloud, which is just amazing to think that it still can do it. But if it isn't broke and it does the best fluid dynamics on the planet, why change it? So working with us, if you want to try Oracle Cloud, there's a little Kickstarter program there for you. We just check that you're not going to mine Bitcoins with it, but that's all. And then you're away to have a play. If you want to work with me on projects, then come and talk to me about working in a project context. And then I would like to take a photo. We have a fellowship program where we provide a research grant and research money to actually get people involved with us. We don't do this in Europe yet. How many people would be interested in applying? I'm going to take a photo because then I can take it back to the boss and say, we should be doing this in Europe. How many people here would be interested in applying for a fellowship grant of $100,000 if you had a chance to apply in Europe? You're not allowed to put your hand up if you're from the UK or America. So show me your hands if you're interested. Come on, come on. I've got to have an argument here. All right, thank you. So that's something that we're looking at. And I'm in the middle of a fellowship program at the moment. And I hope very much that I have a project on AI to analyze the stages of fetuses as to whether they have congenital heart diseases coming along. The other thing that we're working on is workstations for researchers that make it very, very simple to use Oracle Cloud. And I'd be very pleased to discuss and get people in this room early access to that product, which is being developed. And finally, and most importantly, we have put a toe into the water. It's quite a big toe. It's at about 2 petabytes at the moment on Oracle Open Data. So this is hosting data from researchers that they want to share with the world. I'm just in the process at the moment of preparing black hole data analysis from LIGO, because the researchers have done their work on it and they have a particular view of how 2 black holes collide. Terrific amount of energy given off, by the way. And they want other people to look at this data to see if they can put a different spin on that data. So we're really interested, and why we're doing the collaboration with the RDA on how we might improve our open data offering and how it might make more sense in an RDA context. So another call to action is become a data collaborator. And if you're interested in, if you have a big data set that you want hosted, one of my favorite projects is a genomics database of 9 terabytes. And it's top of the pops in the Oracle Cloud at the moment. It's most downloaded. So I'm really pleased about that because it was my project, but anyway. So that's where we are. We are open for collaboration and for discussion. And I will be taking back a lot about what I've learned regarding FAIR today and the last 2 days and tomorrow, I hope as well. Thank you so much for a brilliant conference, and I hope that was interesting.
So thank you, Richard. So now I think I'm more having the correct title, but Mimi Sundler, please. You are the head of R&D data and AI governance and policy at AstraZeneca.
Yes,
Please.
Thank you.
Okay, one more. There.
Thank you very much. So, hi everyone. My name is Mimi Sundler. I am head of R&D, data policy, data governance, and AI governance at AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is a large pharmaceutical company. We collect and run clinical trials in plus 40 countries all over the world. We consume a lot of data as well as generating data within oncology, cardiovascular, metabolic diseases, respiratory, autoimmune disease, etc. So I had the pleasure of being with AstraZeneca for many years and actually starting the data sharing journey with AstraZeneca in terms of large scale external data sharing, which all started roughly a decade ago. So I'm going to talk about where we started, where we are today, and what we see coming in the data sharing journey, and also what opportunities there are to collaborate with the research data alliances, and what the biggest industry challenges from a pharmaceutical industries are today in terms of data sharing. So if we go back 10 years ago, where it all started was mainly policy and regulation driven from why pharmaceutical companies started to share data. So if we go back to 2013, 2014, there was a lot of bad press about pharmaceutical companies not sharing data. You might remember Ben Goldacre, Bad Pharma campaign. It was a lot about transparency equals trust. So be transparent with your data. That will generate public trust. So from about 10 years ago, we saw a lot of new regulations and policies coming into place, and pharmaceutical industry responded with greater external data sharing, publishing in peer review journals, publishing on clinicaltrials.gov, setting up data sharing platforms to be able to respond to data sharing requests from anyone around the world. So it was very much driven from that perspective. Today, we see many data sharing platforms all over the world that has grown up, like Vivli, Yoda, etc., where a lot of time and resources have gone in to share data. AstraZeneca have shared hundreds and hundreds of studies to many platforms, and so have many other pharmaceutical companies too. So it's interesting to see a little bit what is the value then of 10 years of data sharing. And I have done research, and I know that many people have done research, and from my perspective, it's surprisingly little innovation that's actually come out from all of the data sharing that we have done into platforms and sharing millions of patient data. So the question is really why don't we see more endpoints being developed? Why don't we see more being incorporated into our clinical trials, more innovation? There are lots of publications out there, which is great, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity to do more in this space. Vivli have a lot of good examples, which is a consortium with many pharmaceutical companies are part of to share data. some of the reasons is actually because of the standardization or lack of standardization when many companies share data into these platforms. We all anonymize our data, but we have different approaches. And one reason as well for scientific utility goes down quite a lot with the quite heavy anonymization approaches that we apply to the data. And different companies use different approaches too. So it's very difficult for researchers to pull data together from different trials. We see the trend of it started off as sharing clinical study data for a particular clinical trial. Today, many researchers want to combine, for example, within a disease area and look at building patient cohorts within a specific area within oncology, for example. So you really need that interoperability between the data and have all of the data points when it comes to omics data, clinical data, imaging data, device data. There's a lot of digital now being introduced in clinical trials, and we do need to harmonize what we all do in that space. There are good examples, for example, the USPA initiative where anonymized clinical data sets been shared for arthritis, where we have seen some good, really tangible research coming out from. A learning that we have, it's from a data controller. So a pharmaceutical company would be a data controller, a data generator. There are risks for sharing data. So we have 100+ privacy laws to comply with across the world, and the data controller is always responsible for ensuring compliance. Even though AstraZeneca has a lot of data, we don't actually own all of the data that we have. We are co-running trials. There's a lot of legal obligations. We buy in data, so they're contractual aspects. On one side, if you speak to lawyers, they say, don't share any data at all. It's too complex, it's too dangerous, it's too easy to breach a privacy law or a law somewhere. You speak to the researcher and they say, well, share more data. Why hold back? We need more data for research. So it's all this balancing act that we need to take in consideration. And one learning is that we really need to think about the risk appetite. So think about and have those proactive conversations with organizations. What risk appetite, where do we put this balance, where is the governance, and how does the governance structure look like, where does the accountabilities lie? So a lot of that we have learned during this 10-year journey. So when we look at the future and what it might hold, I think the value proposition has changed and the drivers have changed from where we were 10 years ago. We're now looking to drive science in a whole other way, making data fair, making data open, accessible in a federated way for research, sharing more data for scientific utility. From this ticking the box of transparency, where it started, is now evolved into something different. And we can thank the COVID pandemic for one thing, and that is it really accelerated data sharing, and actually Research Data Alliance has produced some really good guidance in that space on data sharing. But we do know we can do this quicker, we can share more data, we can collaborate in the ecosystem around data sharing. We see that a lot of new large pan-European, pan-global data sharing platforms and initiatives are ongoing at the moment. We have the IMI Facilitate. It's about returning clinical trial data to patients to help in their healthcare journey. We have the EMA Raw Data Pilot. We have the European Health Data Space, all about broad data sharing, share more data for broader purposes. So we do see those drivers, and we do need to think about how we are preparing ourselves to do that. So some of the things I think we have learned that we need to continue to work on is that we came from a place where data was used for single use into multiple use. It's all about the reuse of the data. There's no cost. When we have a human biological samples, a blood sample or a tissue sample or tumor sample, we generate the data, the genetic data or PK value. That data can be reused over and over and over again, but we need it to be high quality. We need it to be fair. Which I know you have been talking a lot about, and we need it to be accessible for many users too. So we've gone from the single use to multiple use. We've gone from my data, and that comes from a company perspective, as well as product teams within a company, to our data. we've come from the world where we did set up clinical trials to really get a medicine on the market, and that was the end point, to show it's safe and effective. But we're going into a world where we need to set up a trial to build in fear in the data collection, in the analysis, and the reporting, and so on, so it can continue to be a valuable resource going forward. We also have gone from single platforms of data sharing to multiple data sharing platforms popping up everywhere. So that comes to the point, what opportunities are there? What are the real challenges that we can solve together? And I think this is some of the opportunities I think we have to work together on. I think in data sharing space, nothing can be done in one area. It's part of cross-functional collaboration across the ecosystem. So I think RDA and industry can work together. The next phase is really to help, I think, industry and academia to share more data, which is fair, to reach that vision so we can access data in a broader way. So if we think about the ecosystem, we have our data generators, data controllers, we have our data users, we have the patient, we have our regulators and policymakers. When it comes to data controllers and data generators, the key things we need to look at is making the data fair. We have the FAIR Cookbook, which is a great example of collaboration between industry and academia, of something practical that can be applied and embedded in the way we work. And AstraZeneca was one of the contributors there, and many other companies too. We need to continue to work on is that interoperability. What is the minimal viable product for interoperability in data? That's something that is still there to work on. We need standards for how do we standardize reuse and anonymization of data so everyone do the same when we share data externally. We need to avoid having multiple data sharing platforms popping up that need to be interlinked, because as a company, you share the same data over and over again in many platforms. That's not sustainable for either the user or the data generator. From a data user perspective, they want to have as high utility as possible. So we need to ensure, and we need to understand what the key user cases are. And I think this is one key challenge for the future. What are the biggest user cases where we can collaborate across industry and academia and beyond? The other part is we need to even the play field between academia and industry. There's a lot of skill sets needed in academia and academic research organizations when sharing data. Pharma has invested massively in data scientists, in FAIR, in data curators, control vocabulary building. It's a whole machinery in many pharma companies, but we don't see the same in academia and academic research organizations. That needs to be lifted and understood, a new skill set and investment being there to even up that flow of data. When it comes to patient, we do really need to continue to protect patient privacy rights. We have GDPR, for example, in Europe that we need to comply with, but we do need to work with policymakers and regulators to push for harmonization of what practically does it mean when we anonymize the data. The reason we have a very scattered landscape today is that, yes, we need to anonymize the data when we share data externally, but we all use different approaches. There's no harmonized guidance to say you should use qualitative risk assessment or quantitative risk assessment when you anonymize the data. That's why it's very hard for researchers to use the data. We need to push and ask policymakers to really speed up this process. For example, the European Data Protection Board, who's currently working on this guidance and has been for a few years. So going back from the start, it started off a single use. We're going into this bigger driver. We want to share more data. We want to have this vision of fair data, which is open, accessible across the ecosystem, whilst protecting patients' rights and whilst being compliant to external laws and regulations. We can only get there with continuing this cross ecosystem dialogue to solve those challenges. And I think that's a real opportunity to work together to do so. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Mimi. And it's a very special perspective with also the patients as owner of the data, I mean, the single observations. So welcome, Dan Nygren. Now I'm so nervous about this with the titles, but you're the education lead at the Amazon Web Services for the Nordic and the Baltic countries. So welcome. Finally.
Is the audio okay? Right, good. Okay, brilliant. Thanks. And thank you for the presentation so far. I'm honored to be here today. So what we will be discussing over the next 10 are we okay to still go 10 minutes or do we need to shorten up? Okay, cool. We're going to discuss mainly three main areas where we believe that we can contribute to the research community and the progression of how we apply and work with the data. So first of all, Amazon, and most people are familiar with Amazon as a brand, but Amazon Web Services, we provide cloud computing. Cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of IT services delivered over the internet with a pay-as-you-go model. And we've been doing this since 2006. We have, since then, we launched 3 services, S3, EC2, and SQS, I think it was. And that has evolved into over 200 services where our EC2, which is our compute offering, is over 600 different type of instances. We deliver these services across the globe in a network of what we call regions. Every single region, we have 31 of them right now, 3 in the making. The closest one is Stockholm. Each one has a minimum of 3 what we call availability zones, and each availability zone has at least 1 data center. Each data center has somewhere between 80 and 150,000 servers when we start, and then we develop. So every time we launch a new region, we launch a capacity on the scale of between 150,000 and 240,000 servers at your disposal. And we have this network across the world, which also allows us to deliver a quite significant amount of both storage data capacity as well as compute capacity. Now, the 3 main areas where we think that we can contribute is our culture of innovation. The second one is what we do with our technology. And the third is the general alignment that we see today between funding bodies and how the cloud works. So at our culture of innovation and why that matters to the research community in general, and why I think it's relevant and interesting for this specific conversation, is that we are a bit peculiar in how we do things. Unfortunately, some of that peculiarity has also come into this presentation. We usually don't do presentations internally, we write documents. We write narratives, and we don't use presentations because that can offset the actual data that we are trying to identify to make decisions. And as I said, unfortunately, some of those traits has come into this presentation, for which I apologize, and you will see when that happens. Nevertheless, the other thing that we do is that we always start with a customer. Our mission is to be the most customer centric company in the world. Now, that allows us to do a lot of stuff as long as we do it in a customer-centric way or customer-obsessed way. So that allowed us to start with selling books online, and having me 25 years later, or a bit more, 30 now, standing here and present things around Amazon Web Services, which is something completely different. And whatever we do, we always start with the customer and work backwards. The second thing is that we apply long-term thinking. We are prepared to create the vision of where we want to go. And even if we don't get there the first time, as long as we have a solid case, we will continue and pivot on that. How many people in this room has a Fire phone? What? No. Right. Because we deprecated them back in 2015 after a completely failed attempt of going into the mobile business in 2014. That was quite a costly failure, but that is what happens. We fail occasionally. But it did pivot, and out of that came a lot of other innovations, like the Echo devices with Alexa or Fire TV, etc. The third piece is really around the willingness to fail. If we are experimenting a lot, we are getting great ideas, and we write a business case around it, we try it out, and sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed. But the important thing is, as we experiment, we don't know what the result is going to be. If we do know what the result is going to be, and we know that there will be a success, it's not an experiment anymore. And so where we have gone with our innovation, research, experiments, whatever we want to call it, it has provided us with an opportunity to go into a number of different businesses. As I said, the Fire phone, it led into devices, and we are have quite a few of them. I want to drag your attention down to the left bottom corner, the retail. We launched something called Amazon Go in 2018, which is basically a real grocery shop. You just walk in and you pick whatever items you want and you walk out, and that's it. You don't stay to pay something somewhere or check out or anything like that. And in fact, the biggest problem that we had when we launched this was that we got queues inside of the store because nobody dared to leave the store. So we had to put people in place to tell them that you have to go, leave, you're done. And so there is a trunkload of technology that goes into that, but that is not what really matters. It's the user experience. And we think about that very much in the same concept when we think about researchers and, and what the research community needs. So it's not about servers, it's about the science. However, there is a fair amount of technology that is facilitating and enabling that for you. We realize that there's a lot of pressure on publishing. There's time constraints. Many are talking about time to science. We have cross-institutional collaborations, which just is increasing and growing with an ever-growing globalization. And that also brings the difficulty of leveraging large data sets, because the data sets are also growing basically by the hour. And all of this comes with some sort of cost. Now, there are some specific programs and initiatives that we're running, like open data. We have the open data program does both enable researchers and businesses to publish data in a common repository for others to use, very much aligned with FAIR, I would say. And you can also apply as a researcher to upload your data and ask us to cover the cost for you. There are a number of different data sets that are important for society that as many researchers as possible actually get access to and do something with to get a result out of it. I think one interesting example of this is really, I have to go back to my notes. It's the Ceratus project. The Ceratus project was actually something that was born out of something that we call a cloud innovation center. We're running it with the University of British Columbia in Canada. And as the progression of the pandemic with the coronaviruses really exploding, emerging, they sat down and looked at what can we do? We have a lot of data collected now. What can we do with it? And within 8 weeks, they built a supercomputer on AWS using over 22,000 CPUs, running analysis on 6,000 RNA samples. Those are 6 million RNA samples over a 2 weeks period of time, which costed $24,000. Thank you. Now, that's an example of getting access to a trunkload of data looking at how can we act on it, acting on it fast and get a result back. And I strongly encourage you to look into the Ceratus project. There's a lot of output and capabilities to be used by that project for others. Another example is what we did with the University of Dundee when it comes to TREs. So that is the, to get this one right, the trusted research environments. The trusted research environments was is a concept where you create basically safe haven for data. In this case, it is medical sensitive data, where you also need to share the data, but you need to do it in an extremely controlled manner. You need to know who has it, and they need to agree with the terms of how to use it, etc. And this is done on AWS Cloud as well. We have done, just one more minute, right? Okay, good. The last part is about the alignment with the funding. We're seeing since 2016, I think, the first framework on cloud computing from Jean came out. Now it is OCRE, so the Open Cloud for Research Environments. That is a procurement vehicle that not only came with the ability of easily procure cloud for institutions and public research institutions, but also with a significant amount of funding associated with it for researchers as an incentive to start using cloud more and seeing what that could use for them and what kind of progression could we get in different areas. And the last example that I want to take is with, and God, I'm going to slaughter this one, but please, if we have any Germans with us, I apologize. Gesellschaft für wissenschaftlich, thank you. GWDG. So I was looking for an English translation. There wasn't any, and so, but they are. That's an IT service organization for Max Planck and a few other institutions like the University of Göttingen, and we supported them in a grant funding request for using cloud in another trusted research environment as well. And I think these are some good examples to start to look and examine if this is an approach that we can expand, that we can do more with within the RDA as well. Thank you.
So thank you, Don. And you also saved the University of Gothenburg when it turned out that we had our backup on the same server as the other data. Major crash. So welcome, Monica, Lasse. Monica is the kind of creator of this plenary. So she has put together the program in a very nice way and will end with her presentation here. So Monica, you are the senior data governance specialist at IKEA company. Please. No? It's working.
That I put together. Oh, well. Hello, yes. So I was gonna, thank you. I was gonna start by saying, hey, it's the Swedish hi. Hey, everyone, hey. So I work at a company called IKEA or IKEA. I realized just now that I forgot to have a slide on what that company is. Does anyone know it? Okay, yeah. Okay, a bit, yeah. So I actually started working at IKEA a year ago. And before that, I spent all of my career in academia. So that was a huge leap. So I've met lots and lots of you at RDA and in different constellations. I'm now also on the board of Swedish National Data Service. So I keep kind of working with data, both in industry and in academia. So today I will not talk about IKEA's work with open data. I will instead give you a little bit of a reflection and comparison of these worlds and how can we collaborate? Because I think the RDA has such a great kind of idea there for partnership with industry, and it was such a great read, and I enjoyed talking to Richard, for example, about this. So what do we need to do then in order to collaborate in a good way? So I wanted to start with RDA vision and mission, and I know Hillary, you showed this in the opening session, but still. So I wanted to highlight the mission. RDA builds the social and technical bridges that enable open sharing and reuse of data. And how can we connect? So how do we make sure that we are building bridges so someone aren't on the other side building a tunnel? And for that, we need to kind of find our assumptions that we come into when we talk about data and when we talk about research and everything we kind of do day to day. So examples of the social aspects could be shared problem definitions. Do we know that we have the same problem definitions? We might use the same terms, but do we actually mean the same things? And that's, of course, it's all about language. Do we actually mean the same things when we talk? And when it comes to the technical aspects, one example is the underlying architecture. So in academia, in many cases, there are funding cycles for infrastructure. So you have 4 years to store data and create all the wonderful services. And then comes a new funding cycle, and you need to kind of show why this exists and why it should keep existing for another 4 years. Whereas in industry, what I find, not only in IKEA, of course, is totally different terminology, because of course it's business as usual. We need to kind of have a stable foundation. So data lake, data warehouse, data mesh. Completely different terminology and architecture. And what does that mean for us coming together when we have these different assumptions of what to create on what kind of timelines? And it's also about the metadata and paradata. I was at a really great session today about instruments and PIDs and got a lot of great ideas there. Yay. Exactly. So it's all about that aspect as well, and the interoperability, because we want to ingest data and we want to share data. And how do we kind of connect all of the technological solutions that we have and want to develop? So, and I'm so happy that the panel has already kind of paved the way here, because you have talked about common language and the need of really having a common language and understanding. So some of the things that I think is important is to really take what we take for granted, put it on the table and look at it. What are our assumptions? What's an infrastructure? What's a workflow? What's data? I mean, that's the big one, right? And so I have that as one of the examples, but another is in academia, we talk a lot about data provenance. And in industry, I find that data lineage seems to be kind of not synonym, of course, but another way of using these concepts and terms of the concepts. Okay, this didn't look good there, but no, I don't know if you can read it. I will kind of talk about this. So some of the things that I have encountered and that I would like to make us aware of when we start building these partnerships for the future. So the value of data, we have also heard about this. It's in academia, that's the discussion we have all the time. What should we curate? What data should we use our time and effort and infrastructure and staff and competencies to describe, to put the metadata in place, make sure it's stored in the right way and for how long of a time? Which type of value? Is it monetary, historical, scientific, etc., cultural? What I found when I did studies, I did research in academia, researchers want to save everything. Everything is valuable and important for the future, everything. And we don't have really the capacity for that. So what do we do then? And for industry, I see in the kind of discourse that we can measure the value of data in different ways. The master data for retail. Yeah, we have that. We need to have that. And we know that if we don't, that's going to cost us. And also then the purpose of data, it's connected, of course, to the value. So, and in academia there as well, it can't be taken for granted that we have a purpose with storing a data set. We might have, if I create something, I might have, this would be very valuable in 15 years. I know it, but we can't know for sure. So how do we kind of put some kind of limits on what to describe and make sure we can reuse? Is it worth the time and effort? And of course, data in industry, it's the backbone of the business. We measure lots and lots of stuff. Some of us do research. IKEA does research as well on lives at home, for example. We need that. It's the underpinnings of everything. When it comes to data privacy, of course, there are commonalities, but also there are differences in the actors regulating the use and potential use of data and how it can be stored and managed and for different purposes. And when it comes to architecture in academia, yeah, as I said before, sometimes you see fragmentation and it's not really regulated, and the interoperability is so important, and we need to kind of try to solve for that all the time. Whereas in businesses, you can see that it's based on a strategy, an enterprise architectural strategy, which is connected to the business values that we want to see. So of course, then you need to provide the funding and the long-term sustainability of that architecture as well. So it's basically more a part of the business, I would say. And when it comes to sustainability, I already gave this example with funding cycles for really important infrastructure, national infrastructures that have to apply for funding every 4 years versus the business as usual and taking the long-term perspective on strategy when it comes to architecture. And that was it. So I say tack and thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Exactly on time. So many thanks for very interesting presentations, and I guess there are a number of questions or issues to discuss here. We said that we would start with if there are questions on Zoom. Ooh. Okay, so those are Zooming. It's written unable to establish secure connection to Zoom. That might be a bad sign. Okay, that's me. Okay, but then we turn to the in real life audience. Questions, comments, something you would like to add? And there was silence. This.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you. Very interesting. I've been a vice president for research at a business school in Germany for 8 years. And as a political scientist, I thought that was quite a challenge also because we have a kind of different attitudes towards data and the purpose and the needs. My question, so basically I have a lot of comments and questions, but I'll try to narrow it down. So one would be, what's your incentive for doing this? You know, what do you hope to get from collaborations or contact with the RDA and with this community? The reason why I'm asking is because somehow the whole open data, as I realized it was, where there was very little interest in sharing. So it was a lot of interest in having our data, but it was very difficult to get access to business data. So I'm wondering a little bit about, you know, if we talk about cooperation, it has to go both ways. So I was just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on, you know, where you see that we can actually partner on an equal term and level. So I would stop with that question.
Thank you. And I think Henrik has been silent for a long time. So please, we go around the table here.
I was just about to raise my hand, so thank you, Max. We know each other. Yeah, I would like to take a bigger perspective on that and not only be data specific. But I do believe there are challenges that we need to face together. And I talked about the three different, the public, the authorities, so to say, society, industry as a generator of wealth in society, jobs, but also tax revenue for research. And that's the third part. And we have to collaborate together. It's more easy from the automotive side to give specific examples of where we actually think that we can never solve the problem on our own as Volvo. We need to collaborate with all the communities in automotive. We need to collaborate with our competitors because as a car brand, no single car brand covers everything. And there are data that we need to share amongst each other and everybody would benefit. So in that sense, of course, that would also mean giving data free access to academia and to society as a whole. And it can be simple things like solving congestions in a city. If we remove all the Volvos from a congestion in Gothenburg, that might be nice, but it won't work in Barcelona because there's simply not enough Volvos there. So how do you actually solve the congestion problem, the traffic problem that cost, I think it's estimated to cost 100 billion euros per year in Europe only. That's a cost for society because we slow things down. So that's where we, for instance, can have a prime example where we would like to collaborate with more or less everybody in order to solve this issue for society. It's good for mankind. And of course, it's good for business because it means that people won't get annoyed. There won't be crashes. There won't be annoyed with cars in general. So it's actually a win-win situations for politicians, citizens, business people, and researchers, because researchers want to solve this as well. So there's very interesting research going on in congestion problems. How do you connect that to energy consumption, for instance? How do you connect that to environmental stability and all that? So is that a good example? I don't know, but I think it's a prime example for us.
Mm-hmm. Richard, would you like to add?
Yes, I would. I'm working. Am I working? Yes, I am.
Yes.
Working. Good. For us, in Oracle for Research, we are part of development. We're not part of the sales organization. I'm no longer in the dark side, as I said earlier. And the interaction is all about partnership, where Oracle can share technologies with researchers to improve the research lot. That's really important for us in helping in doing good research. So what's the payback for Oracle? There's two things. One, becoming a trusted partner with a group of people, a university, a commercial organization, will see benefits in the long run for Oracle. People will buy product as well as part of that, hopefully, but there's no obligation as part of the Oracle for Research platform. The other thing is AWS has done the same, but we've all done some amazing work in the COVID crisis. And that philanthropic approach of lifting society and helping in a time of crisis means I think Oracle can feel a bit proud at making a big contribution towards that. And in its own right, that philanthropic support is a good thing. For my projects, so talking about the energies involved in a black hole collision is a great story for a salesman to take to, dare I say, an ordinary customer to explain Oracle technologies that can be applied in their business. So it's a tool for helping Oracle in the world. That's the collaboration partnership. Supply of technologies to help people do science better, but then off the back of that, enhance our relationships with people.
Thank you. Mimi, AstraZeneca is quite advanced in sharing data.
It's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. From an AstraZeneca perspective, we have very ambitious goals for 2030 to eliminate or significantly reduce the cause of death of cancer and many significant diseases that we have around the world. And that is never going to be achieved unless you have access to an enormous amount of data and skill set to analyze that data. And a lot of it is done by collaboration with other companies, with research organizations. To be able to do this, we really need to standardize the data and have it interoperable. That's going to be one of the key aspects to solve for, and having safe places to analyze the data in a protected way together jointly. AstraZeneca is not going to solve that, on our own, and neither is any other pharma company. We need cross-functional skill sets to really look at how this could happen. Often the resources internally are set to develop drug projects, but you really need that broad brain power of many different cross-functional areas to get together. How can we standardize data that we share externally? How do we comply with privacy law and assure data controllers that it's safe to share the data whilst maximizing scientific utility? That takes a lot of work. What is the true value of sharing the data, and what disease areas should we focus on what are the key problem statements? I think there's value to just go back and see, right, in Vivli, CRDSA, all of this sharing platform for 10 years, we need PhD students, we need people to look into what was the biggest value, where did we get the impact that we needed, and where can we learn from that? I don't think any company on their own can do this. We really need to work together. And we saw that started during the COVID pandemic to work in that way, and I think that's the way forward.
Thank you. Don, would you like to fill in from your presentation?
Thank you. So Max, if you unleash me now without giving me a time bound, this is going to be the last comment.
The dinner served 1915.
So I'm going to discuss it on two levels. Amazon is a 1.5 million employee startup. And as that, with that size comes also quite a large responsibility. Besides the largeness of the company itself, we also have an impact in the whole supply chain to that, with all of third-party providers and all of those things. And we are on a steep mission on being even more aggressive than we have been in regards to our sustainability goals, as an example, which requires us to collaborate way more than we perhaps did previously. And so I think that what we're seeing is that we're on a general path to free up and find ways to become more open on sharing data. And some of the data that we have, I mean, we can identify data quite quickly that really has no real business value for us. It has business value, but it's not unique, and may very well serve the rest of our organization way better if we can get a bigger impact in the rest of the society of getting use of it. So that was one level. The other level is really, just as Richard was alluding to, we are very much on the enablement side and just trying to figure out and help to create the interfaces in a way that allows for perhaps several different constellations of security and data to be shared. I think that the trusted research environment is an example of that, that creates an incentive and perhaps more flexibility on getting more data from businesses, even if it is perhaps not completely open and free for anyone. It can still, we can find ways of increasing the availability of more data, which I think is going to be a good step forward at least, and probably mark the way with some successes. Wow, that was only 3 minutes.
Thank you. So, Monica, now we have the chance to tell about IKEA and the work with data, and I guess it's in flat packages.
It is, yes, ones and zeros. So I'm really, I can kind of connect to all of the previous speakers, because one of the things that IKEA has is, as I mentioned, the study done and a report produced every year, life at home. So really, what is life like in different parts of the world? And that's a very nice longitudinal data set, right? And can really inform the world about different things. I'm also thinking about the, we have the IKEA Foundation trying to tackle sustainability and climate change, those kind of things, and being really philanthropic. And I think there are great examples there as well, where we can collaborate to show the impact that different things have on the world, and go together towards greater goals. So that's two things that come to mind for me.
And what do you gain from sharing data? More than
Okay. So okay.
So
I'm new,
values,
but yes, exactly. So I need to go for the tagline for IKEA: a better world and everyday life for the many people. So I mean, can we contribute and collaborate to provide a better world for the many people? That's what we want to do.
Thank you. Looking forward. So thank you. I'm again checking with the Zoom.
I do a question. Thanks. Thank you. So this is from Hugh Shanahan. It's a question from Monica. Hugh says, I may have picked this up wrong, but you said that in business, the value of data is clear. I'd like to ask how you determine when data is of low or even zero value. In research, we have always tied up with the, as you put it, imponderable questions about a data set having value in the future. How do you avoid that?
Okay. I'm not sure that there was one part of this question that I didn't really get. How
do you determine when data is of low or even zero value? In research, we are always tied up with the, as you put it, imponderable questions about a data set having value in the future. How do you avoid that?
Yeah, that's a huge and very difficult question. So let's collaborate on it. No, but yeah, I think academia can really learn some things from business when it comes to kind of having frameworks for determining value. But of course, there are so many different stakeholders and actors, and for one data set, there might be value for some, but not for others in the future. So it's a very good and difficult question.
There's always a danger of, if I delete this data, will I need it in 5 years' time? You never really know. And the only practical answer to that question is to consider, can I store it very cheaply somewhere just in case? And if you can't get to that, yes, I can, or it's not worth 2 cents a gigabyte or whatever it might be, then that's the point where I think you say you throw it away. But there is always that chance. And data on open data, one of the things I think is fascinating is researchers that I'm working with are very keen not to throw data away, but they can't afford to put it on keep it on their servers. So giving it to us to curate that data and look after it and record if people do use it. And then over a period of time, if really no one looks at it after 10 years, then perhaps you can say that's of zero value. But by having it there just in case, we don't know what the next virus is going to look like. We don't know what data we might need to deal with that virus. So keeping stuff somewhere, all right, it's a lot. It takes a couple of days to get it back off of deep archive. You've still got it.
And in the pharmaceutical world, we need to keep our data. There are retention codes, so we can't delete data until we have the grad hitting in, which is
well, in fact,
25 years after
you'll get in
end of life of
product.
So so we need to keep the data, but there are still frameworks that can be applied in terms of the richness of the data, the quality of the data, perhaps the IP of the data. There are different areas that we would look into to assess the value of the data that we have, even though we're keeping our data as long as we can.
Thank you. I see a number of hands. Could you? Yeah. I get instructions. One more question.
I have a short question related to AstraZeneca's presentation. My name is Monica Marin. I'm sociologist. I'm from Romania. You said that I'm curious to find out more about it. You said that you have shared a lot of data, and in terms of innovation, there is a low results. But I wonder how you define innovation in terms of creating added business value, or you follow what happened with the open data that you shared in terms of social results or social impacts, because you, in my understanding, you share some private goods that you expect to be turned into public goods. And do you assess based on some criteria the results that you presented?
Yeah, so it often takes many years to get the true value of research, and every pharma company, not just AstraZeneca, but as part of clinical trial transparency commitments, we all share data. So any person in the world can ask for data, and we would share into platforms and pushed out hundreds of studies. Because we've shared data for 10 years now, there's been more exercise to see, right, what can we see 10 years on, what has come out? And when I talk about innovation, I think what would value the most is, I would say, impact clinical trial design, or ensuring that we are meeting unmet patient needs. That's sort of top. Then there's obviously publications, and there are new diagnostics and tools that can be developed, new analytical methodologies. We do see some great work being done, and I think there's more assessment to be done 10 years on. My point is that we have a lot of resources associated with sharing the data, and we see that in many cases, the researchers don't turn up to even look at the data when we have had a request. So we track who is accessing the data, what is it used for, can we collaborate going forward? And there's more and more, as I was talking about, the drivers and the value proposition by sharing data has sort of gradually changed over the years, where I think AstraZeneca and many other pharma companies wants to collaborate and wants to work together in data sharing platforms where possible. So we are tracking, but I think it's my point was really, I think we can learn from the past and see what can we do more of. Some things we're hearing from researchers into platforms like Vivli is that it's hard to even have any scientific utility of the data because it's so little data left once we have anonymized it. We, for example, we banned age to 5-year bans. We elevate country to regions. We're reducing adverse events. There's certain things we need to do. So the data set that the researcher receive can be of quite low scientific utility. And that's my point. If companies are doing this differently, some people are removing a lot, some people less, because everyone is unsure of what GDPR perhaps is actually requiring the pharma companies to do. And that's where the controllership of the data and the accountability of the data comes in. So everyone tends to be on a conservative side to just not breach any patient trust either. So it's, I think there's work to be done in that space to increase the scientific utility and get more value. But I think we will still track. Hopefully we will see more coming out in the next couple of years.
So time is running, and I would like to actually end the session now and thank to our panel. Many thanks, and especially to Monica, I would say, who arranged it.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And then I also promised to remind about the dinner, which is 19:15, and it's on the other side of the river. And remember, when you travel with the boat after 6 o'clock, there is still a boat running, but it goes in 2 directions. One direction you come home to me approximately, and the other you come to the restaurants. So please think about which direction the boat is taking. And there is the bus 16 is also useful, but then you need to walk a little bit. So 19:15 it starts. Warmly welcome. See you. And yeah, you need to have reserved, of course. You should have this plate on your ticket here. So see each other in the evening. Thank you for today. Thanks. Mm.